These extended Who's Rounds were intended to be bonuses for people who subscribe to my Patreon, but it seems appropriate, sadly appropriate, that since its subject, Michael Allaby, passed away earlier this month, May 2025, it was only right to share this as widely as possible, as an acknowledgement of Michael and perhaps a memory of him. I consider myself very lucky to have spent time corresponding with him. He was always very enthusiastic, and he had a fascinating life. So let this serve as an acknowledgement and a thank you to Michael Allaby. Welcome to this edition of Toby Hadoke's Who's Round Revisited, in which I go back over some of the interviews that I conducted during Doctor Who's 50th anniversary and release alternative versions of them. In this case, my interview with Michael Allaby, a longer version, as well as providing a little bit of context here at the beginning to give a bit of insight into my process of going about the interviews and my memories of them. This one, I'd always wanted to interview Michael because he has a fascinating life and career beyond his acting. So, as a side note, it was an instructive moment during this interview where I sort of start by almost dismissing his acting because I sort of wanted to show him that, well, I'm not just interested in that, I'm interested in you. So a pure motive, but one where, as I say, you have to be, you have your wits about you. It was no issue done, and it's covered perfectly fine. But in undermining his acting by going, oh well, you didn't do it very long, and on we go, and you'll hear what happens. I almost missed actually just how important acting had been to him, and it's one of the most touching parts of the interview when he talks about when he stops acting. And so I immediately thought, don't go in with any assumptions about anything next time you interview somebody, even if they've only had a very short career. And that was based on experience, because as I say, sometimes people who've had lives outside acting and or Doctor Who don't want to dwell on it too much. It's not I'm about so much more than that, and I was aware that Michael was about so much more than his acting career, but as it turned out, I came very close to undermining something actually that was very important. So a lesson learned, that's what I took out of I think it's interesting when one ponders on these interviews what I took out. Some went well, some went better than others, and usually I torture myself for something I said wrong or something I forgot to ask, or an impression I feel I might have given. It's the interviewer's lot, or it's the Toby Hadoke's lot, where I always look back and mine everything I've done for where I might have caused offence or done something badly, which is why I try not to listen back to these, but give you them, as I'm presenting them, as unedited as possible. Michael's ended up being edited because I talked to a lot of people from the Keys of Marinus. Early on, it just seemed to be one that the Keys of Marinus and the Savages were both stories where I was presented with various options for interviewees, and I took them all. So I did a Keys of Marinus, Survival was another. So I did a Keys of Marinus special, which meant that out of necessity, Michael's interview was cut down. Again, looking at it now, I knew that was going to happen. I knew it would be one of many. So I didn't hang about. I would probably have spent more time with Michael. But still, what you are getting here is more than was contained in the original release. And as I say, the reason I wanted Michael was because he's a very interesting man, an interesting life outside of Doctor Who. He has become a writer, although he says he was always a writer. He always wrote, even if not professionally. But he writes books about the natural world, articles too, about plants and animals and the countryside. He once spent a year watching a field every few days and describing the life of the field, and also include its history and other things that were happening in the natural world in the surrounding area to give context. But it's a reflection on rural life, the life of a field. It's now out of print. It was published in 1981. But that's just an example of the sort of thing that he does, because he writes about something very important, the weather and climate, and indeed was writing about those things before it was fashionable so to do. And of course that is something that has relevance to sometimes some of the concerns and subject matter of Doctor Who, and of course it becomes more and more relevant as time goes by. So I thought Michael was somebody who had a really interesting career outside of the show, because for my whole lifetime, so the past 50 years, he's been writing about the natural world, having had, as he said, not a brief career as an actor, but actually 10 years as an actor. But now he's written 100 or so books, and he's also written chapters and articles. And he's worked for the Agriculture Organization, the World Meteorological Organization of the United Nations, and the Countryside Commission. He's written 15 official guides to the National Trails of England and Wales, and he's written an article on environment for the Encyclopaedia Britannica Book of the Year every year since 1974. So, he's an expert in his field. He's a very interesting person outside of Doctor Who, but of course he's also interesting because of Doctor Who, because he's in the Keys of Marinus, and he's one of those actors in that show who plays a number of different roles. He starts off as an ice soldier in episode 4, and then he has the much more prominent role of Larn, who is the prosecutor's assistant, who's rather charming and helpful and nice in episodes 5 and 6. So he's got a lovely presence, actually, and a lovely gentleness about him as an actor, and he's quite he's a benign and likeable character. So that's Michael, who has been in touch with me since I caught up with him in the run-up to re-releasing this, because I'm also preparing to write a short biography of Michael for the edition of Too Much Information on the Keys of Marinus, which, as I record this, is still in preparation, and so will likely be released after this. So there's more of Michael, and so I won't tell you everything that he tells me in our recent catch-up, but as I record this, Michael turns 91 in a few weeks and is currently fully occupied as a carer for his wife. So he says he's had a bit of a change of career, but is still in fine fettle at 91 and happy to chat about his thoughts on climate, weather and the environment, which I will include in the future edition, Too Much Information on the Keys of Marinus. So do check that out, which will be, as I say, when I release this for patrons, that episode will be out shortly. I don't know about non-patrons because I don't know the situation with these Who's Rounds Revisited yet for you guys. So if you're listening to this and you're not a patron, I've obviously decided to put them out there. And if you're not listening to this, then I can say anything I like about you because you're not listening to it. And if you are listening to this and you're a patron, thanks very much. And I hope you enjoy this new way of presenting a Who's Round interview with a little bit of context, a few memories, a little bit of an update, and I think most importantly, the bits that you didn't get to hear the first time around. So here, in all his glory, actor, writer, and gentle soul and interesting man, Michael Allaby. Oh, and apologies for the quality. I had to interview Michael over Skype, and this was a really, really early one, so I didn't know exactly what I was doing and didn't have the best equipment. But Michael lives in the middle of rural Scotland, and so we were unable to meet up. But he was happy to talk over the telephone, so I wired up the most primitive bits of equipment and did my very best with it.
An unbelievably long time ago, and I'm still alive. Yeah, how about that?
And it's a curious thing because obviously acting was something you did quite briefly.
Well, no, not all that briefly. For about 10 years, when I was very little, there were two things that I really wanted to be, and I made my mind up about this at a very, very early age, and one was to be an actor, and the other was to be a writer. And best of all, actually, was to be both, so that then I could write stuff and stand on a chair and declaim it. And I'm very lucky, I guess, because I have actually been both. But the theatre was my first love, and that's where I worked. I worked in rep theatres all over the country, and in Guernsey and all over, and in a children's theatre that spent a year touring, mostly in Scotland. I understudied in Doctor Who, in The Mousetrap. I understudied in The Mousetrap for about 15 months. I worked at the Mermaid Theatre at Puddle Dock with Bernard Miles and folks. So no, I was really into it. It was my life.
And yet it's a curious thing, and I think we should address this straight off the bat, is that, you know, I feel quite guilty about contacting you about Doctor Who, because you've made quite an impact as a writer about climate change, which when you started, or about the weather and...
Yeah, well, what happened? As you may know, actors are out of work sometimes. And when I was out of work, I always got sort of temporary jobs doing this and that. And I ended up working for a voluntary organisation right at the very beginning of the environmental movement. It was in 1964, and I left it to do the Doctor Who, and then when Doctor Who ended, I went back to it. And that's the way it worked for a little while. You know, I'd go away and do an acting job and then come back. But the last theatre I worked in was in Guildford, and it burnt down. And it's very hard to explain just how traumatic that is if you're an actor. I'd done, I think, 2 plays there. We were rehearsing another one, and it was overnight. You know, we performed, we'd gone home, and I had a costume fitting appointment in London at a costumier's. And I went there, and when I got there, that's when I found out that there'd been a fire, and I went down to Guildford, and right enough, the place had burnt to the ground. And that was the last theatre I ever worked in. That was the last acting job I ever did. Soon after that, the people that I was working for, this voluntary organisation, started to get a bit pushy and wanted me to work full time. And I was working in their editorial department by then, working on their publications, and they publish a journal or magazine, and I was working on all of these things. And that was when I started writing. I'd always written. I mean, I wrote ever since they taught me how to when I was a wee lad. But this is when I started writing more seriously, or getting paid for it. And so I started working for them full time. I gave up acting. And then, after a few years, I became involved, just before it began, with a magazine called The Ecologist. And I got to know its editor, a chap called Teddy Goldsmith. I got to know him quite well. And I went and I started writing for them, and then I started working for them. And through that, eventually, I ended up writing books. And since then, I left The Ecologist in 1973. And since then, all I've written are, well, pretty well, all I've written are books. And books, to start with, about the environmental movement. That was the first one that I ever wrote. But before very long, after a few years, I was writing about natural history, zoology, plants, and then increasingly about weather and climate, meteorology and climatology. And this is not kind of proselytizing. This is just because it's absolutely fascinating. And what I was writing about was actually how it all works. And that's what I've been doing ever since. Then I took to another branch that I'm working on just at the minute, which is compiling dictionaries, science dictionaries. And I've done quite a few of them, and I'm working on one at the moment. And so...
You must have seen a change over the years, because when, let's be honest, you're writing about something that is seen as hugely important now, but I would say that when you started writing about it, it must have been difficult to have people listen to your voice in a way.
Well, in a way, but I'd always had an interest. I have to go back now, back now into some ancient history, because before I became an actor, I was in the RAF, and I flew aeroplanes for the RAF, and you're taught meteorology, not a lot, as much as you need to know, I suppose, but it's very important to you, obviously, particularly in those days when you didn't have all the electronics that aeroplanes have these days, and you have to know what the weather can do, and you have to understand how weather forecasts are put together and understand what they mean. And so for a long time, I'd had an interest in the atmosphere and what's going on there. And the writing about weather sort of crept in. Alongside other things, I'd write a book that was about some aspect of the natural world, and there'd be some climate in it, and it sort of grew from there until eventually publishers were asking me to write about it and write books about, wholly that.
And so, I mean, back in the day, how had you entered the acting profession? And of course, we're talking about Doctor Who that you were in. You were in it in the very early days before it was the institution that it is today.
Absolutely, yes. And it was done very differently from the way they do things now. You could, in those days, they recorded everything, obviously, but you couldn't edit tapes. And so it was as though it was done live. But you could stop the tape while you moved to the other part of another part of the set, and then carry on. So the tape could stop and start. But if something went wrong, you just had to keep going. And things could go wrong. The monsters that we had in the one that I was in were called Woods. And the poor old Woods, they had a very uncomfortable life because they wore a wetsuit, which is sort of rubber stuff, with this big sort of insect head thing, and flippers. They were very fierce. But after a time, in one of the studios, you could see the sweat sort of running out through the gaps in the costume. It was very uncomfortable for them. But you just had to keep going. And one of them, arresting a prisoner and dragging them away, tripped over his flipper. But he had to keep going.
Yes, bless Peter Stenson, who I actually spoke to a couple of weeks ago, and holds his hand up for the fact that it was him that picked up. But because your initiation, you've actually got a very nice part in the Keys of Marinus.
Well, I did, yes. Well, I actually had to, because the first time I was one of those ice warriors that died. I was able to come back because nobody had seen my face. And I had to fall off a cliff, which is done by falling about 3 feet into kind of crumpled black velvet. So the camera saw me go past, but not where I went to. And then they put the sound over it. But then I could come back as this guard fellow.
Yeah, and you were cast by John Gorrie. Do you remember John?
John Gorrie, yes, I remember him. Yes. Yeah.
It was his only Doctor Who.
Yeah, he did other things. He went on to do many other things, of course. I'm not sure that I wasn't in another play that he did for one of the ITV companies. I can't remember. Yeah, had Philip Barron in it, I seem to remember, but I can't remember much about it now. But I had a big part in that. And
do you remember William Hartnell, your Doctor?
Oh, yeah, I remember him very well, yes. Not that I ever got to know him. He was kind of too grand for the likes of us. He was a rather quiet, reserved man. perfectly polite, but, you know, he had a lot to do. He had a lot to contend with. I mean, he created the part, and he was on almost all the time. And so, you know, and as I say, this wasn't done like filming is done now. Well, has always been done. It was done almost more like a live performance, and so he had to concentrate. He had a lot to think about, and so you didn't really get to know him.
It's a curious thing for actors of my generation, looking back at television from that time, is that I guess it was just a job, but were you aware that you were a part of a burgeoning phenomenon in terms of the medium of television?
No, we had I had no idea of this at that time. I don't think any of us did. I know when the series ended, we all went round to, Betty Lambert was the producer. We all went round to her house and there was a party. But, no, I don't think anybody realized just how important it was going to become, how significant it was, or how groundbreaking it was. We had the electronic music, of course, and we had quite complicated sets. I mean, a lot of this took place in caves and things like that with rocks made of polystyrene. You know, it was quite complicated. It was all done indoors. You couldn't go out, you know, there was no location filming or anything like that. It was all done in the studio. But no, I don't think anybody realized that this was anything more than, you know, a children's entertainment.
And
having said which, when they showed it, when we saw it, my daughter, who was quite little then, hid behind the sofa.
Oh, well, she wasn't alone.
There you go.
And it's obviously I contacted you through your website, and you were kind enough to reply. Do you find that Doctor Who is something that people that does crop up in your life quite a lot?
Yes, it does. Yeah, people get in touch with me about it. There was a convention a while back, and a nice man ran that out. I didn't go to it. I live somewhere, as you probably know, fairly remote, and so it's not very easy for me to go to things that are a long way away. But yeah, he sent me photographs of various people, and asked me to sign a lot of photographs. Yeah, this comes up fairly often. Yeah.
And have you seen it? I mean, you sent the photographs of it because it's available on DVD.
Yes, I know. I can't remember the name of the guy. Actually, he was running a kind of Doctor Who festival, and a year or two, well, maybe last year, I think. Can't remember a lot about it. But these were still photos he was asking people to sign. He was collecting signatures. So,
well, I guess as an actor, being in Doctor Who always lends you a certain immortality.
I suppose so. In my day, when I was young, the more amusing thing and the more, in a way, significant thing was understudying in the Mousetrap. It was kind of like national service for actors. There was a demonstration once of actors demonstrating outside. We want our theatre back, outside the Ambassador's Theatre. And that kept me going for about, 15 months. I performed twice. It was the best rehearsed performance in London. Because we rehearsed every week, and so in 15 months, 2 performances. That's a lot of rehearsal, not much performance.
And which part did you understudy in the Mousetrap?
I understudied the lead, the detective.
The detective, indeed.
Yeah, and also the kind of comic character called Christopher, I think.
Yes,
he was called.
the husband.
No, not the husband, no. The
young man. The young
man, yeah, I did him. And that's the one I played a couple of times.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's another sort of institution, isn't it? The Mousetrap.
It is. And the company manager at the time, a man called Tony Huntley Gordon, he was ever such a nice man, but he told me that he'd been there since it started, He'd been going 25 years by then. And he said he remembered after the opening night, which was towards the end of November, he went home to his wife and he said, "This will keep us going till Christmas." 25 years later.
Well, and of course, Doctor Who's quite similar in that. And again,
Well, it is in the same sort of way, except it hasn't kept any one person going that long.
No, sure. Sure. And I mean, what's your opinion of television now compared to then? Do you keep up with it? Is it something that you
Yeah, yes, we watch television, obviously. When I gave up acting, it was very, very painful, and I don't think I've been inside a theatre since. I couldn't bear to. It's like that. But no, I watch television. Television, of course, has advanced hugely. In a way, it's not so much fun, but and I've not had any contact with it for a very long time, obviously. Though, with my writing hat on, I did actually do a few documentaries, years and years ago. Don't do them these days. Much too old.
But I'm interested that you say that giving up acting was very painful. Is that because it's not a job, is it? It's a calling.
No. The advice was always, as I'm sure you know, that if you can think of any other way at all of earning a living, then do it. And if you can't, you only do it because you can't do anything else. And it's your life, it's a way of life. And yeah, leaving it was actually very traumatic for me in many ways. It's only fairly recently that I've stopped missing it.
Goodness, all these years later.
Yeah, years and years and years later. Yeah. And once you leave, of course, there's no way back. It's
No, and it's not. It's obviously it's not a practical thing, is it?
No.
Be an actor, really, if you have family and, as you say, earning a living takes precedence over.
But you have to eat, and as an actor, that's not guaranteed by no means. But then I was very lucky.
Was there a lot of work around at that time? Because I always think of the 60s as being halcyon days compared to acting now. Because
I think it might have been. I mean, there were repertory companies all over the place. There was a lot of touring companies, a lot of touring going on, and so you'd go back to London for a bit and through Spotlight, or you could go. You spent your time going around the agents, obviously, but there were reps. Where did I go? Guernsey, Swansea, Newcastle. My daughter was born in Newcastle while I was in rep there. Tunbridge Wells, Guildford, as I said, all over the country, all over the place. Bridlington, the summer there. And it was good and it was bad. You were doing a different play every week, and so it was very easy to learn sort of very bad acting, very bad habits. But at the same time, you got a huge amount of experience in quite a short time. And it's only, later on, it became much more difficult to find work. And I was out quite a bit. I think it's probably much more difficult now.
And do you remember any of your other fellow actors from Doctor Who?
No, I don't, I'm afraid. No, it's so long ago. No, I don't, and I've had no contact with anybody. The theatre, as it was, used to be quite a small world, and you used to meet up with people. But I never met up with any of them. So, no, I'm afraid not, no.
Well, of course, because Doctor Who started on the 23rd of November 1963, which was the day after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And everybody remembers where they were when they heard that news. So do you remember where you were?
When I heard that news?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. My wife and I were going to have dinner with a friend who lived some distance away in London. And it happened while we were on our way there, and she told us when we arrived. She'd heard it. Yeah, that's where we were. Actually, I can't remember exactly where she lived, but that's who we were with. Yeah.
And that was 50 years ago.
Yep.
This year.
Yeah. Mm. Yes.
And you live, as we've mentioned in the interview, you live remotely. Is that to do with the weather, or is that what has found?
Well, no. I've spent a lot of time in Scotland. My wife is Scottish, and we lived in Cornwall for 28 years because the Ecologist magazine moved down to Cornwall, and I went with it. And then when I left it, about a year later, I just stayed, and that's when I started seriously writing. But we always had a mind to move back to Scotland, and a friend of ours, we thought about this for years, and our kids had left school and so on, so there was nothing really to keep us where we were. And a friend spotted this house, spotted an advertisement for it, so we came up, looked at it, and bought it. And been here ever since. That was in 2000 we moved up here. We've been here since then. It's probably got the nicest view in Britain, actually. It is a spectacularly beautiful place. I look out over a narrow stretch of sea towards the northern end of the Isle of Bute. You can see on a clear day, not today, it's a bit hazy, but the mountains of Arran in the distance, they're about 25 miles away. But it's a bit of a pain to get to. Our nearest town is 25 miles away, and a lot of it along single-track roads.
Which is indeed why we're doing this over Skype rather than me popping round for tea.
Well, it is. You'd be most welcome, but it's quite a long way. It's quite a long way. You get used to going on ferries to get most anywhere. We have a half-hour ferry journey to get to our dentist. It's again a way of life, but it is extraordinarily beautiful.
And do you have another book in you?
Oh, I keep writing. I can only write when I get commissioned to write. I don't write speculatively. Can't afford to really. But I'll keep going as long as I can. Again, publishing is in a very dire state at the moment, and it's all changing because of electronic publishing and so forth. And so nobody knows quite what's going to happen. At the moment, as I say, I'm working on another science dictionary. I've run 5 science dictionaries for Oxford University, and this one's for a different publisher that I'm, as I say, I'm working on. Actually, I'm not literally working on it at the moment. I'm trying to put together a flat-pack kitchen cabinet, but that's something else.
That's in the meantime.
That's in the meantime, yeah.
I mean, do you embrace internet publishing, or are you romantic about hard?
Oh no, I embrace it. I don't have a problem with it. Well, I don't have a kind of conceptual problem with it. My problem with it is how do you get into it? How do you make it pay? The practical things to do with it. Where it will go, of course, at the moment, nobody really knows. Nobody knows. It's emerging and changing all the time, and raising problems and solving them as well. But the big problem is actually how do you make money out of it. But for example, the dictionaries that I do for Oxford, they're all online, but they're all online as part of a big online educational academic resource. And actually, that last bit of filming I did, I had to go down and do an interview a promotional interview for OUP, and which was quite fun. So, everything I do now moves online. It can get a bit frustrating when I go Googling things to look things up for reference and come across something and then realise I wrote it. That doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's wrong either. But
well, that's the opposite of Googling yourself. You find yourself by accident.
I do. Yeah, it happens. Yeah. So that's what happens if you write a lot. I have written a lot. There are a lot of books.
Well, and that's the issue that we have, which leads us nicely, is that people are enjoying these podcasts that I'm doing about Doctor Who, but they are a free internet resource.
Yes.
So as a result of them being free, I ask my victims, of which you are the latest, to nominate a charity, so that if the people that have downloaded this for free have enjoyed it, if they could donate to a charity of your choice, that would be nice.
I would choose the Red Cross. The Red Cross does amazing work for people who are in distress, serious distress. They're very brave. They go to places that other people wouldn't go to. They don't give up. They're very good. It's a very good organisation, and I'd support that.
I think that's an excellent cause. And do you have a message? I mean, you recorded it nearly 50 years ago, and you very kindly agreed to talk about it all those years later. And it is of genuine interest to the listening Doctor Who fans out there. So, do you have a message for Doctor Who fans on its 50th birthday?
On its 50th birthday, Doctor Who altered my life in quite significant ways, and it's had a profound effect on millions and millions of people who are much more important than I am. And so my message to people, I guess, is just keep on enjoying it. It's fun.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, Michael. I do appreciate you getting back to me and agreeing to talk.
Oh, thanks. You're welcome.
I'm sure a small part of your life from 50 years ago.
Indeed. Yep.
Well, take care, and thank you very much indeed.
Okay, cheers. Thanks.
Cheers, Michael.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Who's Round Revisited, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. In this edition, I was talking to the actor and writer Michael Allaby. That interview was conducted on the 18th of February 2013. I'm very grateful to Michael, who's a very helpful and charming fellow, and about whom you can find out more at michaelallaby.com.